occur continuously, and those are trends. Those things go on, and we're pretty familiar with that because they take a long time. We talk about them all the time. That's aging, that's immigration, economic growth, global warming, going on for a long period of time. Extremely important when it comes to the future, and we certainly want to take those into account. The real excitement, however, is when the future jumps from one thing to the other. When actually what in mathematics is called a discontinuity appears, a disruption, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Of course, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the appearance of the internet and the World Wide Web, 9/11, the tech bubble bursting, et cetera, are all of those with the financial crisis we're in right now, is a discontinuity. The problem with the future is that we can predict where the trends are likely to be, but we are clueless about where the discontinuities are. And therefore, most people simply say, well, you can't predict it, so there's not much reason to talk about it. Well, gee, the real future, the real excitement of the future is the discontinuities. And as somebody said yesterday, as Ingo said yesterday, we do not know where the discontinuities will be, but we need to and can prepare for them anyway by sampling some of the interesting discontinuities that could occur. Even though we don't get it right, which we will never get it right, we're at least ready for that discontinuity. When I was young and newly married, my wife and I took a group of high school students to Switzerland with a group called the Experiment for International Living, and I still remember their mantra was, expect the unexpected. Get ready for the fact that today is not going to last. One thing I tell people is that the present is a temporary condition. However you define the present, it's not going to last. So enjoy it, deal with it, work in it, but always be ready for it to change out of some kind of a discontinuity. Let me back up then and talk about the issues that you're going to be dealing with without going back through the whole area. This is the picture of how discontinuities occur. They begin way, way down the probability. This is basically the line of public awareness. That line there is what's on the public agenda and what's not. And you know what's on the public agenda today. You're dealing with it every time. And we need to talk about those in this research. But the real value add is what is next. What's going to pop above the line that we haven't thought of, that people aren't paying attention to? And the problem with that is, in communication, is that they've already heard about it. Oh, I heard about that. That's not going to happen. Yeah, we know about that. But this is terrorism before 9/11. This is nuclear problems before 3 Mile Island. This is hyperlinks before the World Wide Web. And yeah, people were talking about it. But have they really taken it seriously? And the difference between when that issue is what we call emerging, which means below the radar, and framed, which means above the radar, is some kind of an event. An event, a discontinuity comes along and it pops it above the line. And all of a sudden, now we're into the mediathons, and now we're into the congressional investigations, and we're into legislation and all that kind of stuff that you deal with all the time. What we want to do is try and figure out what some of those are. Now, let me tell you the problem. There are thousands of those. Which ones of those are going to pop above the line? We can't tell, because we don't know when the events will occur. One thing we can tell, however, is that some of them will. And again, practicing on some of them. What if this were to happen? What if that were to happen? What if this issue were to become the major issue of 2009, 10, 12, 15, 20? What are we going to do about it? It's very much like calisthenics. It's very much like jogging. You know, jogging is not transportation. People don't get anywhere. In fact, they end up right where they started, but they feel good, they're in shape, they've exercised themselves. So what you're doing in thinking of these emerging issues is you are going through a form of mental jogging, mental calisthenics. What if this, what if that? And the purpose is to break us out of the present and break us out of the future that we expect to happen, because that one is probably not going to happen. So, two different distinctions, outside in, inside out, and the distinction of continuous change versus disruptive change. The term for this from biology is called punctuated equilibrium. It has that concept of a back and forth. You go a long time, boom. Long time, boom. And those punctuations are what create another concept that I think is one of the most important, and that is this concept of an S-curve. This is how fundamental disruptive change goes on. This is the picture for you mathematicians of trend extrapolation, which is part of the future. A lot of futurists discount this. I don't discount this. There are trends going on and we need to take them into account. And even though they're smooth, someday they will become important and they will require a change in policy. But the real big difference is the difference between the old period, which is what I call the no problem period, the present, to, oh my gosh, what is happening? We're running around, everybody's concerned. My gosh, there's this and that and the other thing. And the good thing about that is that it's not going to go on forever. It will settle down again into a new period of equilibrium. The bad news is you don't know when. Are we at the beginning of this? Are we halfway through? Are we almost done? So compared to, I taught algebra when I was in college, and we got to y equals mx plus b. Let me tell you, after that, I was done, they were done. We weren't going to go any further into all this higher level mathematics. But the picture of the S-curve, the picture of a jump from one type of society to another, from one set of conditions to another, is an absolute fundamental concept to be thinking about the future. And we have a name for that. We call it an era. Here are the eras, changes in eras that industries have experienced in the last 30 years. Every single one of those industries, people woke up in that industry one day and said, oh my gosh, the world will never be the same. Doing away with the regulated air travel, doing away with the breakup of AT&T, utilities and power generation, deregulation. I don't know what the disruptions are in Canada particularly, but I'm sure you've had them as well. Every one of those has created a new era. We think that the future is this apparent change, when in fact it's one era after the other. One era each one. We know the concept of an era from history. The Depression was an era, the Cold War was an era, all of these periods of time. Notice they all begin with a discontinuity and they end with a discontinuity. The Depression begins with the stock market crash, and it ends with opening of World War II. The Cold War begins with the explosion of the atom bomb, and it ends with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Each of these has that kind of bookends nature. What we forget, however, is that we're in an era today. This is an era. We forget it because, first of all, future historians haven't told us the name of our era. Our grandchildren will know what the name of our era is because they'll study it in history books. We are their history. And we are making history and we are participating in history even though we don't know what it is. And secondly, we don't know how this era will end. But end it will. And one of your jobs over the next 3, 6, 9 months is to think about what is Canada in the next era? How will this era end? And how it ends will usher in a whole new kind of era. A whole new form of values and beliefs and trends and policies and issues and people and all of that. And that's where the fun is. Because we say, well, it's fun after a while. Thinking of your world going away, frankly, right off the bat is not very much fun. But after a while, okay, I can handle that. And frankly, the people in that new era, just as we are, our grandparents, if they knew the world we lived in, would hate it. They wouldn't want to live the way we live with cell phones and rushing around and all of this stress and performance and stuff like that. And our grandchildren are going to be happy in the world they live in, even though we wouldn't want to live there, whatever it is. But nevertheless, it's one era after the other.